All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is John Tokar, Chief of the Center for Cryptologic History, and for the next 30 minutes or so, we will be providing an update on the National Cryptologic Museum and Library. And this is session 9, if you're not sure where you are. And we're going to hear today from Dr. Vince Houghton and Mr. Rob Simpson from the museum. Dr. Houghton is the current director of the National Cryptologic Museum and former historian and curator of the International Spy Museum. Rob Simpson is the National Cryptologic Museum librarian. Now, both of them, you can read their full bios in the program notes that you got and the abstract of this presentation. The questions, as with all previous sessions, you can submit them via the Q&A function in Microsoft Teams. When typing, if your question is directed at Rob or Vince, respectively, indicate that, and we'll answer the questions at the end like we've done both days, and I'll relay the questions to the moderator if they're not able to see them. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to Vince and take it away, sir.
We're working on the unmuting here.
No, you're still muted, Vince. There you go.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I hit the buttons one too many times. Thanks, John. You know, I'm a historian, not a computer. We've been on Zoom now for what, 2 years or whatever, so I should know how to do this. But good morning, everyone. I'm not going to speak for very long because we want an opportunity to get to any questions that you might have. Plus, a lot of what Rob is going to say is much more relevant to a lot of you based on the research and other things that you're going to do. But since we've been down for as long as we have, the Cryptologic Museum has been closed now for over 2 years. I want to give you a little bit of an update because we are sniffing the finish line of getting the museum back open to where all of you can come visit us in person. And, you know, it's one of these things where it's been nice. I'm an introverted person. I like being alone, but it's been nice not to have a lot of people. But I can't wait for visitors to walk through the door again. And we're getting there. So can you hit me slide forward, please? So we haven't been sitting around, you know, just resting on our laurels here. We've actually been doing a whole lot in the now almost 2+ years that we've been down. One of them is a full reconceptualization of the museum. From top to bottom, we basically took a step back and said, all right, we have this opportunity, we're closed. Let's take a look at everything that we're doing and make sure we know why we're doing it and see what's missing and what possibly we can do better moving forward. And you can't do this while you're open, right? I mean, you can't have visitors coming in and trying to engage with the public at the same time you redesign the entire museum. So because of this work stoppage, we had the opportunity to do this, and we did it from top to bottom. By that I mean literally new floors, new ceiling, new roof, new walls. Everything is different. The outside of the building is the same. I can't change that as much as we've tried, but the inside is going to be a very new experience from anything you've seen before. We've rewritten and rewritten every piece of writing inside the museum, new labels, new everything across the board, new AV, new experiences when it comes to interactivity than we've ever had before. And this has been also an opportunity for us to figure out what we have, what are our assets, what can we kind of strengthen and do well moving forward. And our assets in many cases are our artifacts, are the things that NSA and the museum has collected over the last 60 years, which we had in our storage facility, but no one had really gone through that and done a real deep inventory of the holdings of the museum. So we took the time to do that one by one, literally 5,000 plus artifacts individually, going through each one, figuring out what they were if we didn't have a lot of information on them, doing the research to try to determine what was there, to figure out what didn't make sense as an artifact. We had boxes of old computer cords that didn't have the computers that went with them. Those are things we deaccessioned and got out of the way so we can understand a little bit more about what we were dealing with. And we were able to really increase our capability of doing asset care, making sure that these artifacts are around for many, many more decades. They were in pretty bad shape, not the artifacts themselves, but how we were storing them were in crates and cases that were completely disintegrating and falling apart, hadn't been taken care of, just because, again, when you're servicing an open museum, you don't necessarily have the time to go and do this. With a small staff, you just all hands on deck to deal with visitors. But when we were closed, we could go out there and do it across the board. So now we have a much better system of asset care. We've also found some wonderful artifacts that we didn't know existed, and no one knew existed. In fact, there were articles out there that said that there are no actual examples of some of these artifacts before. Well, there weren't anywhere except for our warehouse, and no one really understood that they were there because they'd been put in and cataloged as like Italian cipher machine with no other information, or green sagaba. Like, what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of story behind that no one actually took the time to research. We've taken the time to do that. So I think when you come to the museum, when we reopen, you're going to find some really interesting new surprises and artifacts that, number one, in some cases people thought were gone forever, but also in some cases people didn't know existed in the first place because NSA had them classified, and then when they were declassified and taken out of service, they're put right into the warehouse. And so there wasn't any chance to introduce these things to the public. So we're going to be doing that, and I think you guys are going to find some really interesting stuff when you come to the museum. We've also done everything we possibly can to create new relationships across the board, both within the IC and the IC museums, but also within U.S. government, NASA, DARPA, those kinds of agencies, and relationships with museums around the world and around the country. So that not only can we look to borrow artifacts that deal with cryptologic history, but we can put our name out there to other museums, lend to as many as we possibly can. That way that people will know who we are and we exist, and can come here when they visit the area. And that's really what we're trying to do. Philosophically, we're not looking at this as a reopening of the National Cryptologic Museum. We're looking at it as almost a grand opening of a brand new museum, mainly because other than the outside of the building, it is a brand new museum. The content is new. The physical infrastructure inside is new, and we're really trying to move in a direction toward a sustainable museum for many decades to come. And really what we're trying to do is make it a destination, not I'm driving from Washington to Baltimore, let me pop into the Cryptologic Museum, not I've got a couple hours to kill before my flight at BWI. Let me go to, kind of how Udvar Hazy was for a while before Dulles. We want people to say, you know what, I'm going to schedule a trip to the Cryptologic Museum when I take my vacation to Washington, or when I'm doing research at the archives, or other things like that. We think we've gotten to that point. We think we're going to have a museum that is very similar to that. Hit me a slide, please. So quickly, we have some kind of infrastructural bureaucratic changes. Timing-wise, we're hoping as a staff to get the building back by the end of this month, by the end of May, at which point we'll start trying to put the museum together as quickly as we can. There's still some construction issues going on. We have to replace the roof, and we're fixing the bathrooms. So that means we're probably not going to open until mid to late September. I'm telling people to be safe, let's say 1 October. But at that point, that will be fully open to the public at a new timeline, new operating hours, as you can see here. It used to be we were open every other Saturday. And I always, when I was working other places, would wake up on a Saturday morning and go, you know what, I'd love to check out the Cryptologic Museum. It would always be the day it wasn't open. And that's not going to be the issue anymore. We're going to be open every Saturday. We're just trading it essentially for Mondays. We'll be closed. And if you notice the Wednesday hours from 10 to 7, we're trying to allow the people who actually work to come by the museum during the week and check it out for extended hours during a weekday. And then finally, we started a new program at the museum that is going to enhance our docent program. As many of you know, if you come to the museum, we have amazing, wonderful docents who are NSA retirees or people that just know the business so well because they lived it for such a long time. We're going to definitely still have those. Those are fantastic, but we're going to supplement it with, now we have a new program where people who actually are still working at the agency, our current mathematicians, current cryptographers, current linguists, current whatever, are going to have the opportunity during their workday to spend a couple hours a week at the museum talking to visitors and enhancing people's visitors' experience by saying, I do this for a living. can't tell you a hell of a lot about what I do, but I can talk a little about kind of how this works in a big sense. So we're going to have this combination of the wealth of knowledge and experience of some of our retired docents and combine that with people who are working now at NSA. It's going to really make an interesting visitor experience. Go ahead and advance the slide. I include a couple pictures here of the inside of the museum. This is coming from the doorway as you would walk in as a visitor down that hallway. You can see we're not quite ready for prime time yet. We're still kind of putting things together. You can advance the slide. I gave this picture because it is a kind of a waypoint for those that know the museum well, going into Gallery 3, which focuses on the defensive. This used to be that room with all the big computers in it. Obviously, there's no artifacts here, but you can see we've opened the space. We're looking to try to make it more navigable. The idea of not having a melange of artifacts everywhere, trying to make it more open space. Go ahead and slide, please. This is like the main gallery space, and for those again that know the museum well, there's a couple things that might jump out at you. There's no more brick. One of the wonderful kind of nostalgic parts of the old building was this exposed brick, but it made it near impossible to do artifacts, and just because the brick is deteriorating, it's falling, it's crumbling. It's not a conducive environment for priceless, one-of-a-kind historical artifacts. We could never get the museum dust free. And so the brick is still there. It's just covered up by drywall, which lightens up the room, it lightens up the area, it opens up the space, and it makes it much easier for us moving into the future to have environmental conditions that are conducive to a modern museum. Go ahead and slide, please. This is another view, like basically from the entryway to the museum. You'll see the bomb there to the left. Let me recognize that. I promise you that's not where it's going. It's not going to be the minute you walk in the door. It's just out of the way right now so people can actually do some work. Go ahead and slide, please. And then I added this picture because for you, this is the right audience. That wooden door is actually one of the ways that we're really focusing on asset care. Behind it is where we have our artifact storage and our space where we keep the priceless artifacts that are part of our collection. It used to be that you actually had to walk those artifacts outside around the building in order to get them inside the museum. This is not the best way to keep things in good shape. So part of the renovations, and for those that have been around for a while, you'll go, oh wow, finally, is a doorway from the inside of the museum into our artifact storage space. So that we don't have to walk, let's say, you know, Hitler's Enigma through the rain and snow to get it back into the building. That was something that was just never able to do before because, again, when you have the museum open, when you have visitors coming through, you can't shut that part down and knock a hole through the wall. So we're looking forward to welcoming you all back. Happy to answer any questions at the end, but I'm going to kick it over to Rob right now because a lot of the work we've also been doing is focused on making the research into cryptologic and signals intelligence and NSA that much easier for all of you. So go ahead, Rob.
All right, John, can everybody hear me?
Sure can. Go for it.
Okay, great. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Rob Simpson, the librarian at the National Cryptologic Museum, and it is a delight to be back together with you all. I've missed seeing you in person, and as Vince just described, it won't be that much longer until you guys can come back into the library and keep me from doing my work again. I can't wait. Real quick first, let me add my congratulations and thanks to the staff of the Center for Cryptologic History for bringing this symposium together under such challenging conditions. It is an amazing accomplishment. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about the physical and digital changes we've made to the library, and hopefully leave plenty of time for questions. The first thing, and this may be more for me and the staff for you, but we're using a slightly changed vocabulary. I now refer to the room that we used to call the library as the reading room, because to me, the entire collection and the various places it's stored is the library. And by using the term reading room, even if just internally, placing the focus on the researcher. So the next time you come in, the first thing you'll notice after the new floors and walls is a new researcher table with power plugs, USB, and seats for 8 people. Other than the table, though, the layout of the desks and shelves is the same. Try as I might, I could not improve on Renee's design. The researcher table will be an obvious thing as we move more towards a reading room structure. What will be less immediately obvious, though, is that there will be a revised selection of books in the reading room. You know, as Vince mentioned, it was very important to all of us to not waste the time we were afforded as a result of the tragedy of the past 2 years. Because of some new capabilities that came with our new catalog, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, and the downtime that we had over the past 2 years, an amount of essentially free time that my predecessors never had, I've been able to restructure our disparate collections into fewer groupings, and then rebuild the reading room collection from scratch to hopefully make it more focused and organized. All of the physical books that don't fit in the reading room are now in an overflow section in the back of the museum on new shelving that is more accessible to the staff. So yes, I was intentionally ignoring my background, and here just to show you that it's not a digital background, let me roll a shelf to show you that they're real. So what this all means for you, which is actually what matters, obviously, is that if I don't screw this up, you'll see greater discoverability when you're looking for material in the reading room, and faster service when you request materials from the back. Next slide, John. Okay, on to the part that you can start benefiting from today, the new catalog. You see the link in the center of this slide, museum.nsa.gov. Remember that, museum.nsa.gov. And that is your entry point into all things museum, although obviously the library part is the most important. The picture on the left is the top of that museum.nsa.gov starting page. And if you were to scroll down a little, you'd get to what you're seeing in the picture on the right, where you see museum collection database on the far right. And then that link below that says browse takes you to our catalog. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where all the magic happens. Regular magic, not like all caps cover term magic. What you're seeing here is the catalog landing page. You can see it's a very simple interface. And in fact, fairly soon, I'm caveating that, on NSA's YouTube channel, we're going to have a detailed walkthrough and tutorial. But today, I'm obviously just doing a broad overview. Basically, you can see the first 4 tabs on the top are the sections of the catalog that you can search. The entire collection, or artifacts, library, and photographs individually. And then within each of those 4 options, you have a choice below of either a keyword or an advanced search. The eventual goal is to use this catalog front end to get at NSA's digital historical research material writ large. So not just the traditional museum library material, which is obviously in there, but digitized special research histories, oral histories, publications from the Center for Cryptologic History, and a selection of materials that have been released by NSA through declassification and FOIA. And in theory, I suppose you could also use it to get at the museum artifacts collection if you were so inclined. No, actually, as Vince noted earlier, our collections manager, Spencer Allenbaugh, has spent that same past 2 years organizing, researching, and documenting our artifacts collection. And so the detailed artifacts descriptions that he continues to refine provide invaluable research information. Next slide, John. Here's an example of a search result. I made this search really specific, so there's only one result, but this is what it looks like if you search the library tab. If you click on the result itself, next slide, you come to a more detailed set of data about that result. So here's the part I'm most excited about. At the very bottom, you can see where it says file and access URL here. If you click on that link, next slide, you reach a PDF of the document. Now, this is in its infancy. I'm not going to lie, we have about 25 total documents available this way. There's several special research histories, an oral history, one Center for Cryptologic History publication. I'm basically doing the ones as proofs of concept. But standing on the shoulders of those who came before me, we have hundreds of digitized documents ready to be uploaded and linked. So going forward, more and more documents will become available this way. There should be new ones linked just about every week. I mean, honestly, the end goal is that everything we have in the collection that isn't protected by a current copyright can be made available digitally. Next slide, please. So as I said, I was going fairly quickly so that we get to a lot of questions. This is the last one. So this last image from the database shows the search option called Browse by Collection. And I just want to wrap up by asking for your help. I don't know if our deeper researchers will maybe ever use this function, But what it does is basically it runs and displays a canned catalog query that I can set up ahead of time and attach to one of these buttons. So this lets people pick a very broad category of material and just browse through it almost as if you're looking through the shelves in a specific part of a library. But one of the really cool things about this type of browsing is that I can set it up to show all of the artifacts, photographs, and library material on one topic all together by clicking on just that one button. Now, as you can see, my imagination for topics the public may be interested in is fairly limited. So using the contact information on the next slide, we would love to hear suggestions for topics that you think should be on this page. And so as promised, our contact information, and just in case you didn't get it the first few times, museum.nsa.gov. Thanks so much, everybody, and now we'll give it back to John for Q&A.
Thanks, Rob and Vince. That was enlightening, and as you might have anticipated, there are a lot of questions coming in. In no particular order, the first one is from Sarap, our good friend in Ottawa. Hi, Sarap. It's been a long time since we talked, but good to hear from you. Her question, I guess, probably for Vince, but you guys can decide. The cost of the redesign seems high. Was the funding public? I assume that means government money versus private volunteer support from the community.
Yeah, so we're fully funded by NSA, and the money is a lot of stuff we did in-house. We're very, NSA has a lot of different elements within it, graphic designers and studio, TV studio people and professionals who do installation logistics work. So some of it was directly, in-house. Others were, NSA also has contractors who are for drywall work and roof work and other things like that. So this actually came directly from NSA, from the DoD money. The foundation is still working on, with the partnership with NSA on the new building that will eventually be built at some point. That was going to be relatively soon, and actually when I came to the museum, that was the idea, was that this would be a transition to a new building. Due to lots of different circumstances, that's going to be delayed for years. And so the idea at that point was we needed to do something about the current building. We needed to make sure that however many years it took for a new building to be built, we needed to maintain what we had. And the only way to do that was to do some pretty significant upgrades. Anyone who'd been there would know that the artifacts are great, but the building was falling apart. And so we're doing the best that we can to fix that, to make it to where, like I said, the environment for artifacts, the environment for documents, the environment for everything that is precious to us from a historical perspective is not only good enough, but is better than what we had before. And really what we're striving for is the ability to borrow documents and other things from like the Library of Congress and the archives, which means we will have an environment in that museum that is state of the art and top quality.
Thanks, Vince. I get a follow-up question, I guess, for you. Can you talk a little bit about your scope of collection? What's in, what's out? Do you have an example of a real museum type artifact that was deaccessioned due to being outside of scope? And if so, what happened to it?
Not really. I mean, there were museum artifact type artifacts that would belong in other museums, like flags, uniforms, things of that matter. And as those are deaccessioned, they're not thrown away. They're given to the DoD, who decides what to do. There are other museums within the DoD complex that certainly would want, Nazi flags. Those are things that didn't make a lot of sense, just because as we were going to go through, we were going to make sure that we went through and kept the thing. We still have about 3,000 artifacts. So we went through and kept a lot of artifacts that we can use moving into the future for temporary exhibits, for loans, for other things like that. So the idea was keep everything within not only the scope of cryptologic history, so anything cryptologic history was kept, keep within the scope of what NSA does in a broader sense, so signals intelligence, electronics intelligence, all the INTs that it works, that kind of intertwine with cryptologic history, because the idea is we want to be a dynamic museum. but that's a kind of a fancy buzzword. But what that really means in the end is that we're going to have temporary exhibits. We're going to bring stuff from storage and put it on exhibit. That's not going to be part of the permanent side of the building, especially as we move forward into a new design building. So we're talking years from now, we're building in a much larger space, or at least designing in a much larger space for temporary exhibits. So we didn't just dump stuff because it's not going to fit in the permanent exhibit. We were very mindful of whether or not we were going to tell stories in the future that we weren't going to tell in September when we reopen. And so really the only things that fell into this category of deaccession were boxes of old computer cords and old flags that we had no provenance for, right? They could have been bought off of eBay. They could have been made last year. There was no information about them. And so we don't throw anything away. We can't, it's government property. But we deaccession them to an agency within DoD that decides what to do with them. Keep them, send them to other museums, do things that we have no say in, basically. So we pass them along and then they go there. Actually, the first thing that we did is to reach out to CCH and say, do you want any of this stuff before we get it? So there's like some historic seals and other things like that were passed along or not passed along because they decided they didn't want them either before they were deaccessioned.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks. David Abertod, who, as you know, is our counterpart at GCHQ, asks, and I don't know who wants to take this, what collection management system do you rely on at the museum for artifact management? Is it COTS or commercial off-the-shelf software, or are you using a bespoke product?
Vince, you want me to talk to that one?
Sure.
So we're using a system from a vendor called Lucidia, and the system is called Argus. What's nice about it is there was a stretch where it accidentally worked out perfectly in that it's COTS, it is cloud-based, and we had just moved to it when we closed for COVID. So Spencer Allenbaugh, the collections manager, and me as the librarian were able to continue a lot of our work from home because we had just switched over to this cloud-based system.
And I think one of the great things about this system is that it is integrated. It's not just a collections management system. I mean, I've worked with lots of different collections management systems over the years. They don't necessarily have a great method for integration with the research side of the house. And what's great about Argus, as Rob explained, is that eventually we'll get to the point where you'll search for a subject matter and you'll get not only CCH documents or CCH publications, you not only will get D-class stuff, what we have in the library, but you'll get artifacts that are related to that and all the information that we have about those artifacts. So it'll be all encompassing, and that's what this system allows us to do. We're not going to have that done tomorrow, but Rob is constantly going to be working on trying to get that system as researcher friendly as we possibly can be. We're now in a position where we're trying to work as closely with CCH, and bureaucratically it's going to be even closer moving forward, as close to CCH as we possibly can, to help them get the information out to the public that they are creating. I mean, the declassified, unclassified information, we try to be a conduit to help them do that. And we're going to do that both digitally when it comes to the stuff on our website and also in person. There's going to be a space within the Cryptologic Museum for CCH publications where you can go in and just pull them right off the wall. They're going to be in racks. You can go in and grab, of course, the free. And again, it's this idea of we want to be a great museum, but overall, we want to be a really great academic institution, right? For the average Bob from Kansas with his family that can love the museum because he likes cool stuff, to the hardcore researcher, we want to be great for both of those. And that's what this system allows us to do, because it really brings the whole universe together in one place.
Okay, yeah, thanks. This is our scheduled end, but we got a few more questions, and if you guys are willing, maybe we can do rapid fire, as they say in TV news. Will the library hours be the same as museum hours? That's an easy one.
Yes.
Okay. Will researchers have access to a Wi-Fi network, and can they bring in their own electronics?
Outstanding question. Yes.
All right. See, rapid. Kate asks, can you share some examples of artifacts that the museum has found that were thought to not exist anymore or not known to exist in the first place?
Not a chance. We're saving it for surprise. We don't want to give away all the good stuff yet, but there were things that surprised some very knowledgeable historians, saying I never knew that existed, and there's certainly ones where there were actual articles written that said this no longer exists, except it had a picture of the artifact and it said courtesy of NSA, and so we said, we had that at one time, maybe it's somewhere, and it was. So we're really looking forward to kind of revealing this to everyone moving forward.
One more for you, Vince, from Richard. Will special functions still be possible with bar and or catered food available?
Yes and no. We are making sure that we, again, are subscribing to the whole real museum concept of keeping food and drinks as far away from priceless artifacts as we possibly can. We do, however, have what we call the magic room, which is a multi-use space. It's not huge, but it certainly can be used for functions moving forward. And that's really the only place we're going to allow food or drink in the museum, just because of, again, for obvious reasons, red wine and enigmas don't go well together. And we don't want to be in a position where we have to worry about these kind of things, particularly with Rob's rare books, right? The idea these are Trithemius, it's now 700 years old. Why the hell do we want to put anything that we possibly ruin that with next to it? So yes, it'll be much more limited than it was before. We're going to limit it to a particular room and not have free reign of the whole museum. But yes, so just let us know if that's what you're thinking about, and that we're probably starting to think about scheduling. I would say if you're thinking about an event post mid-October, we're probably fair game now. But if other than that, it probably won't going to work because we're hoping we get it open on time, but it's out of our hands. It's all supply chain stuff now and construction and things like that. So just let us know what you're thinking and we can go from there.
Yeah, cool. I know that's been among many other things. I know promotions and those kinds of things have been nice to have in the magic room. So it's good to hear that will still be possible at some point. So last question. I think you've already probably answered this as much as you can, but I'll let you decide. For those who weren't at the foundation's meeting on Tuesday, can you give a brief update or a source or a link with the latest developments? I know you touched on it, but is there anything more that you guys can or want to say about that?
So I think they put a recording of the meeting on LinkedIn or Facebook or other places, so you can go check that out. I think that there's a really interesting relationship where at one end, the foundation, as you can see, it's not the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation anymore, because they really are branching out to things beyond just focusing on the museum. So at one point we're moving in parallel, but kind of slightly directions moving away from each other a little bit. But at the same time, we're coming together much as far as an agency, NSA, and the foundation to find ways to work together on things broader than just the museum. So there's going to be a kind of a different way moving forward. That being said, the foundation is an integral part of, everything that we've done up to this point at the museum, when it comes to getting artifacts, when it comes to getting things for the library. The foundation, of course, is full of wonderful ex-NSAers and people who are well-versed in cryptology that we rely on. We almost overuse when it comes to trying to have bring in information and assets and expertise and wisdom about kind of the past and everything historical when it comes to NSA. So even though they're branching out, they're becoming much broader educationally focused than they were before. We're not letting them get too far because the built up wisdom and knowledge of that group of people in the foundation is not something that we're going to let get away from us anytime soon.
All right. Well, we're really grateful to both of you for joining us this afternoon and giving us all an update on what's happening over at the museum. And we're looking forward to you guys being open in a few months. But
And John,
thanks
if I
again
could,
for coming.
really quickly, if I could just say, you can track our progress on Twitter, on Facebook, and other places. We're going to eventually start putting milestones as we go through the summer, and it'll be much more apparent and clear when we're going to open as we move into the summer. But you can follow along either on our Twitter or Facebook page. That gives you an idea of what we're doing and when we're going to open for sure.
All right. Well, we appreciate that. And thanks again, gentlemen. And we'll see you down the road. Thank you.